Hello, and thanks for joining us today for the preview of the top 12 manufacturing ERP systems report for 2018. My name is Chris DeVault, and I'm with Panorama Consulting. Just a little bit about myself before we get into the webinar. I'm manager of software selection here at Panorama Consulting. I also have a certified supply chain analyst certification from Apex. You can see our website, panorama-consulting.com, and you can follow us on Twitter and at Facebook as well. This is a special offer for everybody joining today. I really appreciate your time. We're excited to give a preview and an early release of our top 12 manufacturing ERP report to attendees today. During this webinar today, we're going to go over a brief introduction of who Panorama Consulting Solutions is. We're going to do a brief overview of the criteria of today's report. Then we're going to dig into each of the vendors on the report and give some high-level information about functionality and overall vendor information. And then we're going to jump into some questions as well. So Panorama Consulting Solutions, we're a digital transformation consulting firm specializing in many different areas, including software selection, OCM, which is organizational change management, business process mapping. We do project recoveries. We also do expert witness type projects. The industries that we specialize in start with manufacturing and distribution. We've done a lot of work in professional services, government, and nonprofit. We also specialize in healthcare and medical suppliers, manufacturers. We've got great experience in the retail and industry and energy industries. Agriculture and food and beverage are some of our sweet spots as well. From a global standpoint, we have a global base of consultants and a global client base as well. We've got tons of industry experience from professional services through manufacturing, distribution, government, human capital, and CRM type resources. You can see here the different certifications that many of our employees have. This is just a sample of the clientele that we've worked with. These are mostly the manufacturing type clients. Again, across the board, we work with financial customers, professional service, manufacturing, distribution, government entities as well. So a small sampling here. Some of the things to highlight, some of the larger companies and some more innovative companies. So looking at technology and underlying technology of these systems in order to keep facilitating these large companies' ability to innovate and deliver products and services has been critical. This is a sampling of the vendors that we've worked with. And again, we've got multiple industries across the board. Here we're just highlighting manufacturing vendors. And you can see from top to bottom, large and small. Now we'll get into a bit of the overview of the report. Some of the criteria that we're looking at for this report and what we analyze within it are the strengths of the Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 vendors, also the niche applications that are best suited for the manufacturing industry. We also take into account the user experience and cultural fit as we're putting this report together. Many different criteria go into this, and at Panorama Consulting, we've been privy to a lot of information regarding RFI responses and RFP responses that are, in the hundreds now from different vendors. So we're exposed to a vast amount of information, and we've got a stockpile of years and years of information for historical purposes as well. And let's jump into the vendors. We'll give you a preview of this report. We're going to start with the Tier 1 vendors, the larger organization software providers. First, we have SAP on the list, and you can see they're almost a $30 billion company. They're approaching that in size. And what that means is large revenue spend on research and development, and also making sure that they're a viable company. Obviously, SAP is not going to be acquired by anybody else, and they're going to be around for a long, long time. We put some data in here around our typical client sizes that we see are implementing these systems. And for SAP, an average sample size client is almost 150 million in annual revenue. Some of the strengths of the manufacturing capability are here. You can see technology is really the underlying premise for a lot of these workflow configurations, a lot of these reason codes and analysis. Excellent use of business intelligence and artificial intelligence from SAP. Now, with some of the vendors, we also like to highlight some of the product highlights and what they view as some of the differentiators, just like on the last slide for functionality. We also like to highlight what the user experience. We've got some things to consider when looking at SAP, and then we're also looking at what is the real customer experience and the culture of these vendors. So from a product highlight and user experience with SAP, they've got a full set of business applications. From the top, they've got S4 and the HANA platform. So this is really their true enterprise, large organization application. Then they also go all the way down to the small to mid-size market with their Business One application. So really a full suite of applications offered by SAP, small, medium, and large size companies. And then also functionality as far as human capital management, CRM, customer relationship management, enterprise asset management, and of course full ERP systems. We find that SAP's user interface is very straightforward. It's fairly intuitive. It's not the best and prettiest, shiniest user interface out there, but it is certainly very functional and it's very adaptable to what our clients need. We find that some of the considerations with SAP is obviously it's the most complex end-to-end solution. So in turn, that leads to very long implementation times. We often see 12 to 18 months, 18 months to 24 months, depending on the phase and approach of this. But SAP typically takes the longest to implement, really because it is the most configurable system out there. And from a customer experience and culture standpoint, SAP is very innovative and really industry leaders, not only in technology, but in functionality and how they enhance their systems. We find working with SAP is very good. They're very partner-centric and they're very relationship-based type organization, meaning they work very well with partners like us who are independent selection firms. The next tier 1 application is N4. And N4's got a handful of products. You can see here they're approaching a $3 billion company. Recent private equity and influx of funding from the Coke company has really launched them once again. We find that on average, the Panorama clients that are implementing the N4 products are about $50 million in revenue. Some of the strengths and the differentiators from a manufacturing side for N4 is the use of bill of materials and the flexibility of the bill of materials, easily adjusting formulas, so formulas within process manufacturing before production and even during production is a differentiator for N4. And then also full lot traceability. N4's got a very nice visual lot trace and track application, which provides drill down capability to really see any traceable, anything that you need to trace all the way down through the supply chain with good visible functionality. From a product highlight and user experience standpoint, N4 does have many different applications. They have recently gone through a consolidation of their LN product and their Sightline product and their SXE They have a handful of smaller applications that they've consolidated and now called Cloud Suites. So in theory, they're taking best practices from each of those distribution, manufacturing, and even some enterprise asset management type applications and putting them into one consolidated platform. The N4 M3 is also another application, really their flagship enterprise application that they are continuing to develop. They also will eventually have M3 in the cloud as well. Like SAP, they have a full set of solutions, including HCM, CRM, Enterprise Asset Management. They also have hired a they have developed a hook and loop team. What this team is dedicated to do is really customize and enhance the user experience, the user interface from all their applications. This hook and loop team is industry leaders from the fashion industry, from the entertainment industry, really all industries across the board on top of business management software. They're really doing some innovative things over there at Infor with their hook and loop team. Some of the considerations when looking at the cloud suite or the M3 products are the cloud maturity. Certainly they have more cloud maturity within their LN, within their Sightline applications than they do M3 currently, but that will change in the future, and they'll continually be consolidated into more of one platform. Another consideration is meeting the requirements of advanced functionality. Sometimes on the lower level of the product line, the small and medium-sized applications, we see third-party applications needed for scheduling and/or advanced warehouse management. Some of the advanced functionality for inventory control may need some add-on products. So that's one thing to consider when looking at the Infor products. From a customer experience and culture, again, the focus of Infor is really the customer experience. They have put a ton of money within their research and development into this user interface and the overall customer experience that their clients are seeing. They are very relationship based. They have new and innovative approaches. They have a platform called ION, which is Infor Open Network, that they are developing integrations with across the board. They also have a product called Mingle, which is very good in the R&D space. And it's a very collaborative type application, allowing for very concise conversations and tracking of projects right down to the actual project level. One of the other interesting things about Infor is the exposure of the influencer conferences. So not only do they have annual user groups and annual vendor conference for their clients, they also have conferences for their selection consultants and also their implementation partners. This gets into a little bit more in depth of the product, of where they focus, where they're going, where they don't play well, and then also some of the product roadmaps as well. So pretty interesting from Infor when we get introduced and invited to those influencer conferences. Very informative. Mentioned two other vendors here for the tier one in this space is Oracle. Now approaching a $40 billion company, so obviously very large, very viable, and a lot of spend in the R&D. Out of our typical clients, we're seeing $575 million in annual revenue. So there are larger clientele, meaning that we are seeing more enterprise type applications selecting Epicor. Selecting Oracle as opposed to their old products, their on-premise products. Some of the highlights here are the cloud apps are a consolidation of the best practices. So what they've done is taken best practices from JD Edwards for manufacturing. They've taken best practices for financials from EBS, also HCM best practices from PeopleSoft, and then even CRM best practices from Siebel, and they've consolidated those functions and that functionality into one core application, which is now the cloud apps. Some of the things to consider when looking at Oracle is the lack of functionality for end-to-end. Now they have come very far and they're making major strides really month to month, but comparative to EBS, their old on-premise version, and even JD Edwards, Oracle Cloud Apps is not quite there for end-to-end functionality. We have seen some of our customers have had very good success implementing Oracle Cloud. Some are still actually considering looking at EBS and/or on-premise JD Edwards. You can see some of the strengths of the manufacturing here. The artificial intelligence and predictive analytics is one of the focal points for Oracle, and the ability to look at and trace issues and what's the impact of the issues across the supply chain. Business intelligence and artificial intelligence, very good. And the last of the tier one vendors is Microsoft. Got an annual revenue of about $90 billion. And what we see on a typical Panorama client implementing Microsoft Dynamics is almost at the $100 million mark. Some of the highlights here is Dynamics D365 has been completely redeveloped into the cloud onto the Azure platform. So we're seeing a lot of good new technology come about and enhancement come about because of that platform. One of the things that we need to consider as our clients are selecting software and analyzing vendors is the IP development. So the specialized niche functionality that historically has been provided by the partner ecosystem, the independent solution providers and or VARs by Microsoft, they're a little bit behind in the new development of their IP on the new platform because it was such a big jump from the old version of AX. I think it was AX 2012 R3 now to the new version of D365 Enterprise. It was a redevelopment, so the partners are a little bit lagging, but we see that they're coming along in the development of their IP. You can see some of the strengths here. Again, easy pricing and quoting, very good functionality from Microsoft on that. The other one here is the algorithmic functional, cross-functional, the algorithmic cross-sell functionality. They're really putting strong algorithms behind the scenes in order to come up with the best possibility of a substitute product or an additional product, and really the ability to look across a platform and look at all the functional needs from a client, and then quickly analyzing what they may have and what they may need. Now we're going to jump into the tier 2 vendors. We're going to start with IFS. Now, IFS is one of the most well-known, unheard of software systems out there. Each time we're introducing IFS to one of our clients through the selection process, usually they have not heard of IFS. When they see IFS and the functionality behind it, they are certainly swung by its deep and rich functionality. And the reason why we put them at tier 2 vendors is because they're on the cusp. They are certainly growing. IFS is an emerging US market, very strong in Europe, and now a growing ecosystem of users and resources here in North America. They really target enterprise type customers, so $100 million and up is really the target type client for IFS. So therefore they are very scalable, but we still got to put them as a upper tier 2 type system. You can see some of the functionality here. Don't have to talk about all of it, but certainly the ability to calculate when products will be finished and available to promise is very strong, and the full supply chain visibility from IFS is very strong as well. Some of the highlights in the user experiences, IFS is one full end-to-end solution, so they have very limited use, if any, use of third-party products. Typically, it'd be like a sales tax application, which usually are kind of typical for any end-to-end ERP systems. They like to develop the functionality in-house and deploy it to their customers, as opposed to teaming up and partnering with third-party applications. Some of the user experience here, wanted to highlight the lobbies. The lobbies is what they call their home pages or their dashboards, and it's very intuitive, very easy to navigate. Once you're on your lobby, it's very intuitive in where you need to go, using queues and numbering systems and whatnot. Alerts and notifications are strong. Some of the considerations when looking at IFS is they are a smaller standalone ERP vendor, so they have one ERP and that's all they do, and they are not looking to be acquired by any of the other big vendors out there. Like I had mentioned, an emerging US market space, so they're certainly gaining market share here in the US on top of what they already have in Europe. And then as far as customer experience and culture, we found that the IFS team has been very flexible in working throughout our processes. At Panorama Consulting, we handle all sorts of different types of software selection, and we have different requirements from our clients. So they've been very flexible. They're very relationship based. We see that they really want to partner with their clients for the long term. We do think that's a differentiator for IFS. And they're not very metric based. Of course, they're measured on revenue. Their company size is measured on revenue and their success. But they are certainly not pushing people for quarter-end deals and year-end deals. They'd rather take a step back, make sure everybody completely understands what's at stake with an ERP implementation, and really making sure they have a good fit before they start the implementation. Next vendor here in the tier 2 space is Epicor. So approaching $1 billion. They have been acquired by KKR as a large private equity investment, and that's been about 4 or 5 years now. And so we are certainly seeing some ramifications of that. Their typical target market, or their target customer, is about 50 million in revenue. They can scale lower and then certainly scale higher and manage multiple billion-dollar companies, but usually that's their sweet spot, is 50 million and up. Some of the strengths here: the system is very easy to customize. The framework is built on the Microsoft platform, so it is very dynamic and flexible in how you deploy and enhance and even configure these things. Some of the product highlights here in user experience: the user interface was a very large focus in the last major release of Epicor. They completely changed the way that users are interacting and navigating the system. Historically, they've actually won awards from Microsoft on best use of the Microsoft platform for an ERP vendor, and that's always interesting coming from Microsoft themselves. And then really, Epicor as a whole, they view themselves as a mobile-first company. And what that means is they're trying to be as agnostic on what type of mobility and devices that they're using. And also they have developed and configured the screens on these mobile devices to basically mimic what it looks like on your desktop. So they really are taking pride in the experience of a consistent user experience across the board. Some of the things that we need to consider here is future product consolidation. So historically, they've had numerous products, including Prelude, P21. They've got ERP, which is now ERP10. ERP10 is really their manufacturing platform. It also really is their flagship platform also. So we imagine some of their other products are going to continue to be consolidated, but the functionality will actually end up in ERP from Epicor, which is a good thing. Another thing that we get exposure to here is the influencer conferences from Epicor. They're very open about what the private equity firm is doing, why they were chosen by them, and how much research and development is going into their product and the future of the product roadmaps as well. So we have very good synergy with the Epicor direct teams. One of the rising stars here from Tier 2 is Avas, and Avas is a German company. They've spun off and have a U.S. division here. The U.S. division is approximately 15 million in revenue. Their target customer is anywhere from 10 million on up. The product, again, is fairly scalable. So they've worked with startup companies. We've worked with startup companies on Avas that have no revenue, and then scale up into multiple hundreds of millions. Pretty good technology on the back end here. Some of their highlights here is just that they do view themselves as a technology innovator. They're very strong in mobility and the product configurator. They've got great functionality around this product configurator, which often is very difficult to set up properly within the ERP space, and it's all organic to their company. So pretty straightforward in the integrations and the flow of their of sales to production there. A consideration for Avas is just emerging U.S. market share. They don't have a partner channel or a reseller channel, so actual Avas resources may be a little bit difficult to find, but they are certainly gaining, the presence here in the U.S. You can see some of the strengths from a functional standpoint. The production scheduler, again, like the product configurator, is a differentiator for them. The ability to do what-if scenarios and drop and drag on that production schedule is very strong in the output that you have behind there. Also, the setup, in order to properly configure a production scheduler, you have to have your supply chain and your inventory really configured properly, and Avas does a great job of helping set that up initially. We'll move on to another tier 2 emerging star here is Rootstock Software. So they are less than 10 million organizations, so certainly smaller, but they are on the way up and growing. They just acquired a company called Canandy, which was their main competitor in the manufacturing space. So the two combined, I'm not quite sure what the revenue looks there, but they are starting to grow. Their target market, their typical customers, anywhere from 10 million in that range on up. Again, probably hundreds of millions they can scale to, but they're not focused on the enterprise type applications. Some of the highlights here, again, a technology innovator. They are built on the force.com platform, so that does open up quite a bit for development and customization and enhancement from the end user side. It also opens it up, obviously for great integrations with Salesforce, the leading CRM out there. One of the things that we need to consider is the vendor viability and resource availability. So as Rootstock continues to grow, they may acquire other companies, and eventually they may be a target for acquisition themselves. And when companies are acquired, it's not ever quite clear what's going to happen with the future of the product. So that's something that you have to consider. We don't see anything on the docket right now, but as they grow and gain market share, they'll probably be an acquisition target. You can see some of the strengths here. Again, the deployment on the salesforce.com platform makes it very agile and very capable of enhancement internally for self-sufficiency as companies after they go live. Now we're going to jump to the tier 3 and niche vendor solutions providers. First here is a tier 3. We have placed SIS Pro ERP as really a upper tier 3. We do see them play in tier 2, lower tier 2 type scenarios, but really a strong tier 3 type solution. They are a South African company with a U.S. division. The U.S. division is about 60 million in in annual revenues. They're organically growing, so anywhere from 5 to 10% per year, and they don't want to acquire other ERP systems and bring them in onto their platform. Typical target customer for SIS Pro is around 25 million. Again, they can scale upwards and they can also scale down, and you can get into the system for a fair price point. Some of the product highlights here was the user interface was a major focal point of the last release. Many SIS Pro users felt that the functionality was very rich, but it was confusing in the old interface. There was too much information on the screen. So a few years ago, they took care of that, and they continue to really enhance that user interface. I always say that you get a lot of rich, deep functionality within manufacturing for the price point. It's certainly not prohibitive. The barrier to entry is not prohibitive from a cost standpoint for small companies. One of the considerations that we see is really the point solutions. So really, to get an end-to-end solution with SIS Pro, you may need to add a CRM that has more customer relationship management type capability. You may need to add some advanced warehousing, something on the back end there, possibly for quality as well, just depending on what requirements are. And you can see a couple of the strengths that they tout themselves on as differentiators is that visualization, and again, a strong graphical planning board for SIS Pro. They can handle many modes of manufacturing, They play very well in the pharmaceutical arena and also confectionery, the candy manufacturers of the world. SIS Pro has a large share of those type entities. Next tier 3 solution really is IQMS, and a combination of tier 3 type niche solutions. So IQMS is very strong in discrete manufacturing. We see them play very well in the automotive space. For automotive OEM manufacturers, companies supplying the large GMs of the world. Pretty niche, fairly niche product for discrete manufacturing within the auto industry here. From an annual revenue standpoint, about 50 million in revenue. So they are, they're not so small, but they are growing in a mid-sized company. Their target customers, again, here they scale. You can get in the door for fairly cheap, on the lower end for IQMS and good functionality for that price point. But their targets really are 10 million, and above here. They can scale up to, $1 billion as well. Some of the things here is ease of use and embedded EDI, especially within the auto industry. The embedded EDI and those integrations with the large auto industry manufacturers and players that are already established put IQMS ahead of the game. The ease of use, it's a very intuitive system. Screens are very functional but yet simple. I actually call it the most bang for your buck for IQMS. You get a lot of functionality for what you pay for. Some of the things that you need to consider, an enhancement and self-sufficiency. So actual product enhancement, a lot of our companies and clients that we work with, they do want to be more self-sufficient after go live, and they don't want to rely on the vendor for upgrades and enhancements and whatnot. And IQMS tends to do that stuff a little bit more on their own. So that's something that we just need to balance and consider. You can see a single solution to manage the entire manufacturing process, including monitoring manufacturing execution system MES data. Very strong integrations there, and really end-to-end, kind of born on the shop floor from a quality standpoint. The next solution here is Plex, and again, we position Plex as a tier 3 niche solution. It is scalable. There are multiple companies that are billions of dollars that are running Plex, and then there's also multiple companies that are below $10 million that are running Plex. So scalable system for for the functionality and the price point that you get here as well. Plex is very strong in the automotive, again, much like IQMS, very strong in the automotive industry. They're gaining market share in other industries, outside of automotive, outside of discrete manufacturing, even process manufacturing, that they're, it's not a focal point for them, but they are gaining some market share there. The UI, the user interface, was a major upgrade from their last release. I believe it's been about a year and a half now since their last the major release here of the new user interface, and it's gotten some very good responses from the market space. Again, deep niche functionality, certainly within the auto industry here. Some of the things to consider are the enhancement of the application itself. So it really is one of the SaaS, true software as a service provider, cloud applications. It was an early adopter innovator of that technology. What that sometimes leads to is self-sufficiency, and lack of development internally after you go live. So enhancement of the application we have to be aware of, and then possible resource constraints. Again, it's emerging U.S. market space, but there's not a lot of VARs and vendors out there that really specialize in the Plex application. You can see here, again, leveraging the built-in MES, end-to-end visibility of the production floor, and a lot of cues and metrics that are visible. And then obviously the ability to meet compliances, different standards with embedded EDI as well. Another niche solution that we're seeing making good strides is JustFood ERP. So JustFood is certainly very specific niche manufacturing for food processors, even a couple of special niche kind of industries within food processing, as bakeries and cookie manufacturers, and some straight beverage companies as well. They're a smaller group. They're less than 10 million in size, but they're again, very rich in functionality for their price point. The target customer, starts around 5 million and can go up. They certainly have hundreds of million, revenue for their clients. But it's a good system, to come off of a lower tier type application and migrate to this. Now this is JustFood is built on the Navision platform, so it's the Microsoft NAV, which is being rebranded into the cloud and being rebranded into Business Central is really the new name from Microsoft moving forward. So Business Central NAV from Microsoft is their small and medium-sized application of the future, and JustFood is an application built on top of that. JustFood was just actually acquired by Aptean, which is a large software vendor with numerous not only manufacturing but other type of distribution and professional service type applications. You can see here some of the strength, again, being built on that Dynamics platform. Certainly has some pros to that. Integrated planning engine, with forecasting. So sometimes when you see niche products that may be built on a different platform, integrations end to end are hard to come by, but they're really ahead of the game. Also, JustFood as a Microsoft developer is also ahead of the game in the new development into the cloud. So their IP is almost completely done for the actual new version of NAV. So a little bit different scenario than we had mentioned before with the AX VARs and ISV being a little bit more behind. Really not the case here. And then again, the early release of the top 12 manufacturing ERP systems report will be available to all the attendees here. I think the report is being made public sometime here within the next 2 weeks. Got a couple of questions coming in here. And the first one is around implementation duration, and can ERP systems be deployed in less than 3 months? So yeah, it's a common thing that we see from our clients is they assume that it's not a very vigorous project, and they sometimes are led to believe by vendors that they can implement in less than 3 months. So I would say that's not the typical answer. Certainly the tier 3 vendors, lower tier 2 vendors, because they don't have the complexity and the technical capabilities behind it, those can be implemented certainly more quickly, but usually it does take about a minimum of 3 months to really implement properly an ERP system. Now, when you're looking at some of the more large vendors, the tier 1 or tier 2, upper tier 2, you certainly have a much longer duration. Typically, it's 6 to 9 months for a tier 2 vendor, and then 12 to 18 months, even longer than 18 months for some of those tier 1 vendors. Of course, depending on your phasing and your approach there. Also, vendors are also coming out of they have more out-of-the-box processes that we see our clients are trying to leverage, and that also helps these duration of implementations be decreased. So more rapid deployment if you are able to use those out-of-the-box processes. They're not for everybody, but you certainly need to understand what they can offer. The next question is about common mistakes organizations make when selecting software. So yeah, I would say typically when clients are doing this or organizations are selecting software on their own, usually they lack in the ability to gather the proper requirements and really the requirements that make them unique and different. So you really want to flush those out, because those tend to be the differentiators between the systems. And then a lack of process definition we find, we do, as I mentioned before, we do project recoveries, and we come in, a few months into an implementation as it's going south, or we come in a year after it's gone south, and we really, peel back the onion and see what the problem is. Usually it's requirement definition, and then it's also passing those requirements and properly defining and designing them with the VAR or the implementing, the system integrator or the implementer themselves. So usually that, it's that knowledge pass and properly setting those expectations around design are what the common mistakes are for selling software. So we really appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining us for this preview. Any business questions can be directed to Laura Florence. She's our Director of Business Development. And again, thank you for joining us today, and looking forward to the next webinar.